Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome to my channel. I am Sophia Nabila. Today I'm going to be explaining to you one of the language teaching methods, which is the silent way. Before we dive into what the method is all about, let's look at the background on how this method actually started. Linguist Noam Chomsky argued that language acquisition could not possibly take place through habit formation since people create and understand utterances they have never heard before. Chomsky proposed instead that speakers have a knowledge of underlying abstract rules which allow them to understand and create novel utterances. Thus, Chomsky reasoned language must not be considered a product of habit formation but rather of rule formation. The emphasis on human cognition led to the establishment of the cognitive code approach. Rather than simply being responsive to stimuli in the environment, learners were seen to be much more actively responsible for their own learning, engaged in formulating hypotheses in order to discover the rules of the target language. In silent way, error is considered as okay. Errors were inevitable and were signs that learners were actively testing their hypotheses. Materials were developed with deductive, in which learners are given the rule and asked to apply it, and inductive, where the learners discover the rule from the examples and then practice it. Caleb Gaetano created a language teaching method that shares certain principles with cognitive code approach by Chomsky. He looked at language learning from the perspective of the learner by studying the way babies and young children learned. He concluded that learning is a process which we initiate by ourselves by mobilizing our inner resources, which are our perception, awareness, cognition, imagination, intuition, creativity, and many more, to meet the challenge at hand. He believes that English can be learned visually through colors, just like mathematical concepts, which can be taught by using colored rods. The silent way came up with the idea of using colors to represent sound or phoneme, and by using the color, we could teach vocabulary and grammar. So, what are the characteristics of the teaching and learning process in the silent way? It can be divided into three parts. At the beginning, it focuses on the basic building blocks, which is the sound. This is introduced through a language-specific sound color chart. By relying on what sounds students already know from their knowledge of their native language, teachers lead their students to associate the sounds of the target language with particular colors. These same colors are used to help students learn the spellings that correspond to the sound through the color-coded fiddle chart and how to read and pronounce words properly through the color-coded word charts. In the second stage, the focus is on the structures of the language. To do this, the teacher sets up situations that would provide as a vehicle for students to perceive meaning. The situation sometimes can call for the use of rods and sometimes do not. They typically involve only one structure at a time. With minimal spoken cues, the students are guided to produce the structure. The teacher works with them, striving for pronunciation that would be intelligible to a native speaker of the target language. The teacher uses the students' errors as evidence of where the language is unclear to students and hence where to work. At the end is the feedback session. This is where the teacher would ask the students to describe their reactions to the lesson or what they have learned. This provides valuable information for the teacher and encourages students to take responsibility for their own learning. Some further learning takes place while they sleep. Now I'm going to show you a video clip demonstrating the silent way as the teaching method in classroom.
Follows, taught by my colleague, Donald Freeman. After the teacher greets the students, we skip to where the teacher is reviewing some of the words the students will use that day by pointing to them on a Fidel, a color-coded word chart on which each English sound is assigned a distinctive color. He focuses on the differences in pronunciation between the and the.
In this afternoon's lesson, we're going to work on describing a house. They're not the same. Look. No. No, look. What is it? Yes, Horatio. More open, Hassan. Everybody. Louder. More open. Okay, good. Okay, so you all front row, come around the table here. What do you call this? Do you know? Of a house?
Is a fence?
Kind of like a fence. It's called a floor plan. Have you ever heard that? What's a floor plan? Do you know? A floor plan. Does it?
The place where you build the house.
Okay, right. Good. So let's start here. Okay. What do we have here? What's this?
Entrance. Door. The door.
Yeah.
Door.
Which one? This one or that one?
The door.
Gideon.
The door.
Mhm.
The door.
Mhm. Mhm.
The door. The door. The door.
Which door?
Front door. The front door. The hall.
Take that out. The
Front door. Hall. The front hall.
and this
The back hall.
The back hall.
and the.
Front door. Hall. Hall.
Okay, so
The front hall.
everyone.
The front hall. The back hall.
Okay. What about this room?
Living room.
Don't forget this word.
The living room.
Okay. What is it?
The living room. The living room.
And
The
here?
bedroom.
No.
The kitchen.
Let's put that here. Okay. So this is
The living room. The kitchen. The kitchen.
Dining room.
Oh, dining room.
again.
The dining room.
The kitchen,
Okay. Abdurrahman
the kitchen,
The bathroom.
the bedroom,
again.
the bedroom,
Careful.
Bedroom.
bed,
Bed.
What's the sound?
Bed.
Okay. So everyone.
Bedroom.
Ah, don't forget.
The bedroom.
the kitchen,
What are the teaching techniques used in this method? Let me break it down for you. The first one is the sound color chart. The chart contains blocks of colors, each one representing a sound in the target language. The chart draws the student's attention and allows them to concentrate on the language, not on the teacher. The second one is teacher silence. The teacher gives just as much help as is necessary and then is silent. Or the teacher sets up an ambiguous situation, puts a language structure into circulation, and then is silent. Even in error correction, the teacher will only supply a verbal answer as a last resort. Peer correction. Students are encouraged to help another student when he or she is experiencing difficulty. It is important that any help be offered in a cooperative manner, not a competitive one. Rods. The rods trigger meaning. Situations with the rods can be created in such a way that the meaning is made clear, that the language is connected to the meaning. At the beginning level, the rods can be used to teach colors and numbers, then moving towards complicated structures like statements with prepositions or conditionals. They can be used as rods or more abstractly to represent other realities. They allow students to be creative and imaginative, and they allow for action to accompany language. Self-correction gestures. So some of the examples of self-correction gestures are: first, the teacher put his palms together and then moved them outwards to signal to students the need to lengthen the particular vowel they were working on, Or second, the teacher indicated that each of his fingers represented a word in a sentence and used this to locate the trouble spot for the student. Word chart. The teacher and later the students point to words on the wall charts in the sequence so that students can read aloud the sentences they have spoken. The way the letters are colored helps the students with their pronunciation. Fidel charts. The teacher and later the students points to the color-coded Fidel chart in order that students associate the sounds of the language with their spelling. It basically shows the list of the various ways that sounds can be spelled. And lastly is structured feedback. Students are invited to make observations about the day's lesson and what they have learned. The teacher accepts the students' comments in non-defensive manner. The students learned to take responsibility for their own learning by becoming aware of and controlling how they use certain learning strategies in class. Now, let's talk about why some teachers choose to use the silent way technique in teaching language, or basically the reason why some teachers prefer the silent way. The answer is because they actually want students to be able to use the language for self-expression, to express their thoughts, perceptions, and feelings. In order to do this, they need to develop independence from the teacher to develop their own inner criteria for correctness. Moving on to the roles that involve in this technique, the first one is the role of the teacher. The teacher is considered as a technician or engineer. Only the learner can do the learning, but the teacher, relying on what his students already know, can give help whenever is necessary. The teacher is silent. The teacher still involves, however, for setting up situations. When the teacher speaks, it is usually to give clues. Next is the role of the students. Their responsibility is to make use of what they know, to free themselves of any obstacles that would interfere with giving their utmost attention to the learning task, and to actively engage in exploring the language. Caleb Cattaneo, the man who developed this method, once mentioned that the teacher works with the student works on the language. Lastly is the role of the student's native language. Meaning is made clear by focusing the student's perceptions, not by translation. Students' native language can be used to give instructions when necessary in order to help the student improve his or her pronunciation, for instance. The native language is also used, at least at the beginning levels of proficiency and during the feedback session. How is evaluation accomplished in the silent way? The teacher does not praise or criticize student behavior, since this would interfere with students developing their own inner criteria. He expects students to learn at different rates, so the teachers who are using this method actually looks for steady progress, not perfection. Here are some advantages of using this method to teach language. It enables a very high degree of interaction because it raises the participation of the students in class. The students or learners cooperate and help each other in class, and in this way, the social aspect of learning is supported. For the students, it is beneficial that they are expected to develop a certain degree of self-awareness and that they can discover the language on their own via testing things and making use of the materials provided by the teacher. And lastly, learners gain practical knowledge. Of course, with the advantages, there must be some disadvantages. So these are some of them. Some have assumed that the silent way can only be used in small classes, but this is not in fact the case. Particularly with beginners, classes of 40 or more have been successful. And then secondly, some people feel that the silent way is a very abstract way of learning a language. However, most of those who have practical experience of the approach appreciate the way they are given the opportunity to function as autonomous learners. Lastly, language is separated from its social context and taught through artificial situations, usually by rotes. This is the only point that can't be refuted. So that's all for the silent method. I hope this video is useful for you. Thanks for watching.